so far we've talked about like the use cases for VPNs, but have we mentioned all the use cases for VPNs? Like we've mentioned essentially privacy protection. Can you think
Right.
of other ways that a VPN might be useful?
Uh,
We've briefly touched on it when we talked about games.
uh, ah, the way that I understood it was like it can protect your data. Well, no, not really.
So again, I'm
Like
talking.
it
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
can't it like I saw this when I was watching a Destiny 2 video. Like it was for a VPN ad, and it blocked someone from DDoSing the player.
Mm-hmm.
So like a
So
VPN can block another player from having your information.
the simple reason why. So okay, in Destiny, I believe a lot of communications between players are peer to peer.
They all, which can be
But it
very
will
annoying.
still work through a NAT, which is what VPN does. So I'm again, this is more of an IP routing thing. But in
Okay.
layman's terms, the reason it will protect you against DDoS is because a DDoS attack can only like if this instead of being Google, let's say it's like a mean guy, like a toxic teammate, right? Toxic teammate
Right.
that is that someone who's actively trying to DDoS you. How would they do that? Well, they would look at your IP address that they get from packets that you send them.
Yeah.
But if you're using a VPN, they don't know your IP, they know the VPN's IP address.
And
And then
so they won't be
they're
able to.
trying to DDoS the VPN, and the VPN has like they inherently have protection against, ping DDoS and stuff like that. Anything that toxic teammate is trying to do, the VPN
Right.
is going to be like they're going to have protections against that to begin with. So yeah, in that case, it will help against DDoS. And apparently, Zeiss is not. What's wrong with Destiny players? Goddamn
Yeah. What is
gatekeeper.
wrong with Destiny players?
Goddamn elitist.
What's that
Anyway,
supposed to mean?
so but this is not really what I was talking about. So you're correct. Like yeah, it protects against DDoS kind of. Like this is a niche application. And fair enough. It's one I didn't think about, so good on you. But I was thinking about more of a more generic reason to use a VPN, more generic use case.
Mm, well, then I don't remember.
So, what if, let's say, you are in Europe, and even more specifically, you are in France,
Yeah.
and you have a friend who's in the US.
All right.
Okay, so this is essentially my case, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you'd like to play together. You'd like to play. Trying to think.
Oh yeah. Get
You'd like
bypassing
to.
region locks.
You would like to. Yeah, exactly. You would like to play Legends of Runeterra.
Okay.
Why do I take this example? Well, because from what I know, Legends of Runeterra is a piece of shit where there is not only is there region lock, but like from what I believe that you can't like there is a hard IP region lock. So that means not only is there like an in-game region lock where you are logged into a server, but
Right.
you can't just like move servers. Like you can't just say, "Oh, okay, next time log me onto the North American servers." No, that doesn't work. It's actually based on your IP address. Like the servers you
Oh.
will be logged in are based on your IP address, right?
Oh.
So let's say that you want to play with your friend but you can't. Okay, what do you do then? Well, what you can do is do a VPN tunnel to the United States. And then suddenly, when you log on to Legends of Runeterra, well, you're coming out from the US. You're not coming out from France. So Riot Games will think, okay, so he's trying to, he's on the North American region.
Yeah.
So a VPN can help you when you're trying to bypass any kind of regional locking. And
Yeah.
that, by the way, that part has nothing to do with encryption, has nothing to do with privacy, would literally work even if you did not have an encrypted VPN.
Okay.
It's literally just the fact that your packets are coming out of an American IP address instead of coming out of a French IP address. That's
Right.
it. That's actually it. Okay. And so like that's actually a really big use case for VPN. So for instance, a lot of gaming VPNs actually do offer that sort of service where the whole purpose is that you're is to bypass region locking.
Yeah.
Except if it's bleeding edge and it's actually a soft region locking, but it's actually ping based, and that's actually completely stupid. But that's a whole other matter because bleeding edge developers, I don't know if they know what they're doing. Anyway,
I don't even know if they know what they're doing.
yeah, maybe let's maybe it's their managers and whatnot. Anyway, so you want to bypass region locking. An example that I like also is South Park. Do you ever watch South Park on like the actual South Park website?
Nope.
Have you? Where do you live? UK?
Fans.
Oh, you're French.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't realize. That's really cool. Okay. Well, if you attempt to uh, go on, so normally, if you're in the US and you go on the South Park website, you can watch all the episodes for free. But if you're in France, you can't do that. In fact, instead, it redirects you to another website where supposedly you have access to the episodes, but actually not all of them. And like, actually, you don't have access because you have to pay for a subscription and whatnot. And so you have to resort to, using Netflix, which is a paid service to watch episodes that are available online for free. Right, you get the problem. Well,
Yeah.
in that instance, what you can do is just use any VPN at all, any VPN, get a connection to the US, go on the South Park website, and you have access. You have access to the free South Park episodes.
Okay.
Um, let's see. Yeah, so another use case, and that's a little bit more niche, but since you're French, you might be interested in that. So in France, there's actually a really interesting thing where you know how the Pirate Bay is blocked in France, right?
Yeah.
So what that means if you try to go on the Pirate Bay, it's essentially going to tell you, hey, I don't know what the hell the Pirate Bay is. The way that works is that, so I'm going to touch a little bit on IP routing, but it's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. When you're trying to reach anything, so for instance google.com,
Mm-hmm.
what do you type in the search bar? Do you type google.com or do you type the IP address of the Google server?
I just type in google.com.
Right. Do you know what the IP address of the Google server is?
Hell nah.
No, you don't. And you don't have to, because there's actually a system put in place that's called DNS, domain name what is it? Domain name system, where the idea is end users do not know the IP address of services. So instead, what you just do, a DNS server is just a record of like google.com. So like that's the domain name,
Yeah.
and it's associated with an IP address. And so essentially when you say I want to go to google.com, you still need the IP address of Google. But then what happens is that first there is a DNS request that's sent to a DNS server. So this is a DNS server. It's a dedicated server that does that. Your
Okay.
request is first sent to the DNS server, like, how the hell do I reach google.com? And then the DNS server answers. And now you have the IP address of google.com and you can actually send your request.
Okay.
So that's DNS in a nutshell. The thing is, most ISPs, so most internet boxes in at least in France, and I believe pretty much everywhere, uh, essentially they work in a way where your computer will natively use the ISP's DNS dedicated DNS server by default. So what that means is whenever you're looking for a domain name, whether it's google.com or facebook.com or twitch.tv or anything, the first
Mm-hmm.
person, the first entity, let's say, that you will ask for information about how to reach that domain name is going to be your ISP.
Okay.
But now let's say you're looking for the Pirate Bay, and the Pirate Bay is outlawed in France. Well, the way the ISP does that, like blocks connections, is they just wipe. Like, let's say normally there is the Pirate Bay. There's a Pirate Bay record with an IP address. What ISPs do in France, at least, is that they just wipe this record. Meaning,
Okay.
if you're looking for the Pirate Bay, you're just not gonna get an answer.
Okay.
But if you're using a VPN, well, by default, when you use a VPN, you stop using your default DNS setting, and instead you're using the VPN's DNS setting,
Okay.
which hopefully is not which normally is not the ISP DNS, but is like another, like maybe it's 8888, which is the Google DNS, which is yet another service, or maybe it's using Quad One, or maybe it's using OpenDNS, which is now owned by Cisco,
Yeah.
etc. But essentially, like, you bypass that restriction.
Okay.
So that's another use case, is if you want to access websites or services that normally your ISP would block.
Okay.
I think we've gone over most of the use cases. Do you have questions?
No.
Okay. So let's see. What's left is, yes, what about the enterprise? So I'm not going to go too much into details about regarding enterprise VPNs, because it's not super complex, and it has more to do with, again, with the technicality of the VPN, like how it works and whatnot. However, we can still there is a distinction between why you would want to use like the difference between a commercial VPN and an enterprise VPN. So in an
Okay.
enterprise, essentially and this is where we go back to the idea of lockdown and whatnot, is you have an enterprise. So this is the enterprise headquarters, and they have what's called an intranet. So the intranet, have you heard that term before?
Nope.
So internet is the connections between networks. The
Mm-hmm.
intranet is connections within a network inside of it.
Okay.
So the intranet is essentially the private the services that are available only inside the headquarters. So essentially it's like think of it as like the corporate employee network.
Okay.
So for instance, this is where you would have like private servers for I don't know, you'd have like, what could you, like let's say you have a finances server running on it, that's your that your employees doing finances want to access regularly, so you'd have that on your intranet. You might have like another like you could have another IT server, you could have an Active Directory, you could have uh an SDN controller. Yeah, essentially you can have a bunch of services that should normally only be accessible when you're inside the corporate network.
Okay.
But now you have a problem, is that coronavirus happened and everyone has to work from home over the internet. So you're in a bit of a pickle right now, because, well, you can't just make all of those private resources available to the internet, right? Like that would be
Right.
just. So Zeiss actually, they probably, I mean, okay, so they could handle some personal files. Like for instance, if the company itself hosts client personal data, then sure. But the employees themselves, I mean, there is also personal information in the sort of, for instance, the Active Directory. So essentially, it's a
Yeah.
credential server, the Windows AD, Microsoft AD. It's a credential server, and in that sense, it has personal files, but it goes way beyond the just personal files. Like we're talking personal files. We're talking mission critical applications. We're talking like anything finances, anything that maintains the network, your uh, anything that monitors your infrastructure. And like I have only an IT perspective, so that's what I can speak about. But essentially, any inside job any inside mission that requires any like IT service at all of that is inside your intranet, and it's actually gigantic. It can
Okay.
get really really big. It like the amount of services you have available online can are you I don't know that for sure, but can be really puny compared to your intranet.
Okay.
Like really, the proportion can be immense. Like, anyways, it's like think of like Google, and like the Google services available online are actually kind of like the tip of the iceberg of all the servers Google are actually running, and a bunch of those are like internal servers, intranets.
Right.
So okay, then you have a problem. How do you make all those resources accessible from remote workers? Do you do you want to take a wild guess?
VPNs or
Exactly.
direct connection.
So what you do is you just set up a VPN tunnel between the remote user and the company headquarters. And the idea is
Okay.
simply the user, so they would have an application running on their computer. For instance, what we're going to be using is going to be OpenVPN. And they just provide some credentials. They say, I am John Smith. Here's a password. Maybe here's a certificate. Or maybe I need so 2FA, two factors authentication, something like that, right? Like I'm essentially authenticating that I am in fact John Smith. And then somewhere on this side, there is a VPN server that hears all of that and that says, okay, so I know for a fact you are John Smith. You've authenticated yourself, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you access to the intranet, to the inside of the network,
Okay.
as if you were there physically.
Right.
But obviously, I'm still doing it over the internet.
Yeah.
But remember that all of this is encrypted as well. So this is not so much for privacy protection. It's just to give access to remote workers without having to like rework your entire infrastructure.